The marble foyer of the Caruso estate stretches endlessly under crystal chandeliers that cast sharp shadows on white floors, each one perfect and untouched until tonight. At 2:06 in the morning, silence is shattered by the sound of a child's labored breathing, a wet gasping that fills the cavernous space like a siren nobody answers. Alejandro Caruso kneels on that pristine marble, his tailored Italian suit still immaculate, his black cashmere coat discarded on a chair that costs more than most people earn in a year, and his 7-year-old daughter Emma lies limp in his arms like a doll someone has broken and forgotten to fix. Her lips are turning blue. Her skin radiates heat like a furnace, yet she shivers against his chest as if the Seattle winter has somehow gotten inside her bones. Alejandro's hands, the same hands that signed 37 death warrants last year, that ordered men into the ground without blinking, that built an empire from blood and silence, tremble as he presses his palm to Emma's burning forehead. The trembling terrifies him more than anything else ever could. Her vitals are crashing, one of the 3 private doctors stammers, his voice thin and useless. The physicians stand against the far wall like expensive monuments to failure, their medical bags opened and scattered across a side table, their knowledge suddenly worthless. One doctor's hands shake so badly he cannot hold his stethoscope steady. Another checks her pulse again and again as if the answer might change if he tries enough times. "We don't know what's wrong, Mr. Caruso," the lead physician whispers. "We don't know." In 15 years of building his empire, Alejandro has learned that only 2 things matter: information and control. He possesses neither now. His lieutenants Marco and Luca stand rigid in the doorway, their guns holstered and useless, their loyalty powerless against whatever is taking his daughter from him. They have seen him order men to be buried alive. They have watched him torture information from enemies with a calm that bordered on surgical. But they have never seen him helpless. Nothing has prepared him for this. A door near the kitchen swings open with a soft creak. Footsteps approach, quick, light, purposeful. Sofia Reynolds emerges from the corridor in her uniform of faded grey hoodie and worn jeans, her overnight maid shift not yet finished at an hour when most of the city sleeps. She is 28 years old but looks 40 from 2 years of living in a 2004 Honda Civic, from 8 years of running from a man who promised he would find her, from muscles that ache from scrubbing other people's homes for $18 an hour. She sees the child and moves. Sofia does not ask permission. She does not hesitate. She crosses the marble foyer in 4 strides and drops to her knees beside Emma, her worn jeans hitting the cold floor with a sound like a prayer. Her hands move with certainty that belongs to someone who has survived things the 3 doctors cannot even imagine. She tilts Emma's head back with a gentle firmness, opens the child's mouth, and in one smooth motion she uses her thumb to clear the child's airway of the mucus that has been drowning her from the inside. 40 seconds pass. Emma gasps. Her eyes flutter open like doors being pulled from darkness. A thin whistling returns to her breathing, shallow still, but flowing, alive, present. Silence swallows the marble foyer. Every person in the room has stopped breathing. The sound of the wall clock ticking is suddenly the loudest thing in existence. Alejandro stares at the woman kneeling beside his daughter, at her scarred hands, at the fierce concentration in her dark eyes, at the insignificant nobody who costs $18 an hour and has no idea that she has just reversed the trajectory of the most powerful man in the Pacific Northwest. Sofia meets his gaze for only a moment before turning her attention back to Emma, checking the child's color, her breathing, her pulse. She needs to stay sitting up for a while, Sofia says, her voice steady and certain, a voice that has learned to be reliable because everything else in her life has been made of smoke. Her body is fighting something. Keep monitoring her temperature. If it spikes again, you need someone who can stay awake and watch her. One of the doctors steps forward hesitantly. What exactly did you? Seizures, Sofia says quietly. When the fever spikes that high, sometimes the body seizes. When that happens, the tongue can block the airway. You have to clear it. You have to move fast. She stands and steps back, understanding instinctively that she has crossed into a space where she does not belong, that these next moments belong to the father and daughter and the machinery of wealth that surrounds them. But Alindro reaches out and catches her wrist before she can disappear back into the corridors where maids belong, where nobody belongs, where invisible people live and die without leaving a ripple. His grip is gentle, dangerous, final. What is your name? His voice emerges like thunder rolling across an ocean no one can navigate. Marco and Luca exchange a look that says everything has changed in this room, though neither man yet understands why. Sofia, she whispers. Sofia Reynolds. Sofia Reynolds. He repeats it like he is memorizing the most important information he will ever know. You have worked in this house for 3 weeks. You arrive at 10 at night and leave at 6 in the morning. You work alone in the East Wing. I have never once asked the nanny to introduce us. She does not know how to answer. She does not know that for the past 6 nights, Alindro Caruso has not been sleeping. She does not know that 3 weeks ago, on a freezing night when the Seattle rain fell like a curse, his security team spotted a woman sleeping in a broken car in a parking lot for miles from his estate, and he became obsessed with understanding who she was. She does not know that he watched the surveillance footage of her arrival at his home, this skeletal woman with calloused hands and eyes that had learned not to hope, and something in him recognized a fellow prisoner even though he was the jailer. She does not know that she was never really invisible to him. Take her, Alindro says to Marco, and his lieutenant steps forward immediately to take Emma into his strong, familiar arms. The child whimpers but does not resist. As Marco carries her toward the medical room on the 2nd floor, Luca begins ushering the doctors out of the foyer with quiet efficiency, the machinery of power shifting and reorganizing around a new priority. Alindro and Sofia remain alone on the marble floor. You saved my daughter's life, he says, and it is not a question. It is a statement of fact, a promise, a threat, and a prayer all compressed into 5 words that hang in the cold air between them like a blade wrapped in ice. Sofia does not know how to respond to a man who owns the city itself, who looks at her with eyes that are storm gray and burning, who wears a suit that costs more than the car she sleeps in. She does not know that he has spent 6 nights trying to understand the invisible woman, that he has pulled her employment records and learned about the $18 an hour, that he has wondered 1,000 times what circumstances could possibly drive a person to live in a parking lot while working. I should go back to work, Sofia says quietly. There is the kitchen to finish. No, Alindro says. It is not cruel. It is simply final, like a door closing on a life that no longer exists. You will not finish the kitchen. You will sit with my daughter until dawn. You will watch her temperature and her breathing. You will do nothing else. She wants to argue. She wants to tell him that she cannot afford to lose this job, that $18 an hour is the only thing standing between her and complete destruction, that she has been working double shifts for months to save the $85,000 she needs in the next 3 days to stop everything from ending. But she looks at Emma's small form being carried up the stairs, and she remembers what it felt like to be a child in danger with no one to protect her. Okay, she whispers. Alindro reaches into his jacket and produces an envelope. He places it in her hands. It is thick, heavy with something that feels like gravity and consequence. This is the first payment, he says, and his voice is like thunder wrapped in velvet. For saving my daughter. You will not refuse it. You will not argue. You will take it, and you will understand that your life begins again tonight. Sofia's hands shake as she accepts the envelope. She cannot open it. She cannot look inside. If she looks, it might be real, and if it is real, she might cry, and if she cries, she might break completely, and there is nobody here to put her back together. What is your story? Alindro asks, and it is the question that will unmake everything she thought she knew about survival, about invisibility, about the possibility of rescue from places nobody looks. But before she can answer, Marco appears at the top of the stairs. His expression is grave. The fever has come back. It is spiking higher than before. Outside, the November wind tears through the Seattle night like a blade wrapped in ice, and somewhere in a parking lot for miles away, a 2004 Honda Civic sits empty for the first time in 2 years, its windshield beginning to frost over with the kind of cold that freezes everything it touches. Alejandro turns away from Sofia, his face now carved from stone. Whatever he is about to do, whatever machinery he is about to set in motion, it will not be as simple as saving a child from a fever. It will be about understanding why a woman with the eyes of a survivor was sleeping in a broken car in the first place. It will be about understanding what needs to be destroyed. And as he moves up the stairs with the weight of an empire on his shoulders, the question remains unspoken but devastating: what happens to a man like Alejandro Caruso when he finally understands that the most dangerous person in the room is not the one with the gun, but the one willing to move toward danger when everyone else freezes? Now let us go back 3 weeks earlier to understand how we arrived at this moment of reckoning. 3 weeks before that moment in the mansion, before the fever, before the questions that would unmake everything, the November wind tore through I-90 east outside Seattle like a blade wrapped in ice. The blizzard had sealed the highways at 11:43 p.m. Visibility dropped to nothing. Snow fell so thick it swallowed the taillights of abandoned cars scattered across the interstate like ships sinking in slow motion. Sofia Reynolds sat in her 2004 Honda Civic on the shoulder, hand shaking on the steering wheel, her breath visible in plumes that fogged the windshield. The engine had died 20 minutes ago. The heater had died hours before that. She wore 3 layers, a torn peacoat from a Goodwill bin over 2 sweaters with holes in the elbows, and she clutched her grandmother's recipe book to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Because it was. The leather cover was soft from 40 years of handling. The pages inside held recipes in her grandmother's handwriting, notes in the margins about which grandchild loved which dish, which Sunday afternoon could be saved by a pot of minestrone and bread still warm from the oven. That was 8 years ago. Before everything broke. Before the man who swore he would kill her if she ever left him kept that promise in every way except the literal one. In her pocket, $78. That was all she had left in the world. All of it. Sofia scrolled her phone with numb fingers, searching for shelters that had space. Every listing showed the same response. Full. Closed. Unreachable. She had been homeless for 2 years, sleeping in this car in Seattle's industrial district near the port, washing her face in gas station bathrooms at 6 a.m. before anyone could see the bruises that had finally faded, before anyone could ask questions she didn't know how to answer. The black backpack wedged in the passenger seat held everything else she owned. 3 pairs of pants. 5 shirts. 1 pair of shoes without holes. A toothbrush. $18 in cash hidden in a zippered pocket. She had been counting that money for 6 months, trying to reach $20 so she could afford a coat for winter. She was still $5 short. The phone battery dropped to 3%. Then 2. Then the screen went black. The wind howled so loud it sounded like something alive and hungry. Snow accumulated on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Sofia pulled the recipe book closer. The cover was warm from her body heat. She thought about calling 911, but what would she say? I am freezing? They would take her to a hospital. A hospital would ask for insurance, and when she could not provide it, they would ask for money, and when she showed them her $78, they would turn her away. Or worse, they would help her, and the debt would follow her the rest of her life like a shadow that refused to leave. A sound broke through the wind. Engines. Multiple engines, moving slow and deliberate through the whiteout. Sofia lifted her head. Through the frosted windshield, headlights cut through the snow like knives. 7 black SUVs. They moved in formation, measured and careful, the kind of convoy that suggested something important was inside one of them. Military, maybe. Federal. Sofia's heart rate spiked. She was afraid of police, afraid of any authority that could decide her invisibility made her disposable, that a homeless woman in a broken car was less a person and more a problem to be solved. She sank lower in the seat. The convoy slowed. The lead SUV pulled in front of her Honda, blocking her view forward. Car doors opened. Men emerged in expensive coats, their breath visible in the cold. They moved with purpose. They moved with authority. They moved like people who had never been told no in their entire lives. A man stepped out of the center vehicle. Tall. Broad-shouldered. His coat was black wool, tailored to fit him perfectly, and it cost more than everything she owned combined. His dark eye scanned the highway wreckage like a general surveying a battlefield. His hair was thick and dark, just beginning to silver at the temples, and there was a scar that ran from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, a thin white line that suggested he had survived something violent and had simply moved on. His watch was gold. His rings were silver. His face was carved from stone, all sharp lines and no softness. Alejandro Caruso. She did not know his name yet. She did not know that he was the most dangerous man in the Pacific Northwest, that he had rebuilt an empire after his childhood was destroyed by his father's fists, that he had made himself untouchable so that no child would ever suffer the way he did. She only knew that he was looking at her car, and something in the way he looked suggested that he did not miss anything. A man named Marco approached her Honda. He knocked on the frosted window, 3 sharp raps that made Sofia flinch. She jerked awake from near hypothermia, her face pale, her lips tinged blue from the cold. The recipe book slipped from her chest. She caught it, held it tighter. "You'll die out here," Marco said through the glass. His voice was flat and final. "Come with us." Sofia shook her head. Every instinct screamed at her to say nothing, to do nothing, to make herself smaller. "I'm fine. I'm waiting for a tow." "There is no tow coming tonight," Marco said. "The highways are sealed. You will freeze." "I'm fine," Sofia repeated, the words a prayer she was saying to herself more than to him. Alejandro stepped forward. His boots crunched in the snow. He looked at her through the windshield, really looked, and in that moment something shifted in his chest. He saw a woman in her late 20s who looked decades older. He saw calloused hands and tired eyes. He saw hair pulled back so tight her scalp showed the red marks of survival. He saw a young woman clutching a book to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her from shattering. And he saw something else. Survival. The kind that mirrors his own escape from hell when he was 12 years old and ran from his father's fists in a Palermo apartment where screaming was the only language spoken. The kind of survival that you only develop when staying alive requires more than breath. He had not thought about that night in 23 years. Standing in the snow on IR-90 looking at this frozen woman, he thought about it anyway. "You have 2 choices," Alejandro said. His Sicilian accent was faint but present, a ghost of the language his grandmother had spoken. "Freeze to death in this car, or get in mine and I'll take you somewhere warm." "Your choice." Sofia hesitated. Her eyes darted between the men, calculating odds. Men like this did not offer help unless they wanted something. She knew that. She had learned that the hard way, in a room with locked doors where begging for help only made things worse. But her hands were numb. Her lips were blue. Her phone was dead. The recipe book felt like it was freezing to her chest. "I don't want trouble," Sofia whispered. "You will not find it with me," Alejandro said. Her body made the decision before her mind could argue. Hypothermia was winning. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. The world started to blur. She reached for the door handle, but her fingers would not obey. She tried again. Again. The door would not open. Or her hands would not work. She could not tell which. And then everything went soft and quiet and dark. She collapsed against the car door. Luca caught her before she hit the snow. He cradled her small frame easily, carrying her weight like she was made of paper. Her grandmother's recipe book fell into the snow, the pages beginning to freeze. Alejandro picked it up before it could sink deeper into the drift. He brushed off the ice carefully, reverently, the way someone handles something sacred. He tucked it under his arm. "Get her warm," he said to Marco. "And carefully. She is barely holding on." The convoy moved. The engines rumbled. The 7 black SUVs merged back into the whiteout and disappeared into the night, leaving only tire tracks that the snow quickly erased, as if they had never been there at all. The highway behind them was silent except for the wind and the ticking of Sofia's Honda cooling in the cold, still running on fumes, still waiting for a rescue that would never come from the direction she had been looking. In her unconscious mind, Sofia dreamed of her grandmother's kitchen. She dreamed of Sunday afternoon light coming through tall windows, of the smell of garlic and tomato, of hands that were warm and safe. She dreamed of being fed. She dreamed of being seen. She did not know that at that exact moment, in a downtown Seattle penthouse, a man named Douglas Hale was reviewing photographs of a young homeless woman sleeping in a car. He studied her face. He smiled. He had been hunting for her for months, waiting for her to surface, waiting for his opportunity. And now the trail was getting warm. Now she was close enough to reach. His accomplice, a woman named Rachel Dawson, sat across from his desk sipping champagne. She was wealthy in the way that came from family money and no conscience, dressed in designer clothes that cost more than a person's monthly rent, her face perfectly constructed by surgeons and expensive creams. They had built their operation carefully over 12 years. Girls. Always young. Always vulnerable. Always nobody who would be missed. Sofia had been one of them until she ran. Until she escaped. Until she became the one person who could destroy everything they had built, because she was the one person who could testify. "She'll surface soon," Rachel said, swirling her champagne. "Homeless people always do." Douglas smiled. He had never failed to retrieve what belonged to him. He did not intend to start now. But Sofia was no longer alone on that highway. The question that would change everything had already been asked. The rescue that would unmake her understanding of survival was already in motion. And within the next 72 hours, the most dangerous man in the Pacific Northwest would begin to understand that the fragile woman sleeping in his guest room held the power to destroy his enemies just by speaking her name. The guest room was silent except for the crackling of the fireplace, flames dancing across silk walls the color of cream. Sofia's eyes snapped open at 6 a.m., her body rigid beneath blankets softer than anything she had touched in 2 years. The panic came first, a blade through her chest. She bolted upright, searching. Her backpack. Her grandmother's recipe book. The $78. There, on the mahogany nightstand beside a cooling bowl of soup. All of it. The door opened without a knock. Alejandro Caruso entered carrying a silver tray, her recipe book tucked beneath his arm like it was something precious. He was taller in daylight, broader across the shoulders, wearing an open white shirt that revealed a scar running from his left temple down to his collarbone, the kind of scar that told a story of survival. His eyes were dark gray, the color of storm clouds before rain. "You're in my home," he said, setting the tray on the mahogany table. "You were hypothermic. My doctor checked you. You're stable now." Sofia's hand moved instinctively to her spine, her fingers tracing the cotton of her borrowed shirt. The fabric lay flat. No shifting. No exposure. She exhaled. "I need to go," she said, swinging her legs off the bed. The floor was cold marble beneath her bare feet. "I have a job interview tomorrow at 9 a.m. In this storm." Alejandro gestured toward the windows. Outside, the blizzard had not stopped, it had intensified. The city below was a blur of white and gray, highways sealed, streets abandoned. Nothing's open. Nothing's moving. Sofia stood anyway, swaying slightly. 2 years of sleeping in a Honda had made her body forget what real rest felt like. Her legs trembled. "What's the job?" His voice was not unkind. "Overnight maid. At a diner on Pike Street." She didn't meet his eyes. "Pays $18 an hour, under the table." "I need it." Alejandro settled into the leather chair across from her, his posture relaxed but his attention absolute, the kind of focus that made her skin prickle. When he moved, every motion was deliberate, economical, like a man who had learned long ago that wasted movement was wasted power. "I need an overnight maid here," he said. "My previous one left. Same pay. You start tonight if you want it." Sofia's eyes narrowed. Why would you offer me that? You don't know me. Because you didn't ask me for anything, Alejandro said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. You didn't beg. You didn't cry. You just survived. That's rare. She hesitated, then nodded once. One condition. I don't live here. I come, I work, I leave. That's it. Agreed, Alejandro said. What Sofia did not know was that while she slept, Alejandro's men had run a complete background check. They knew about Douglas Hale. They knew about the trafficking network that operated like a spider's web through the city's underbelly. They knew she had testified in federal court 3 years ago, that her case had collapsed when witnesses vanished, that Hale had sworn to find her, that for 8 years she had been running. They knew everything. And Alejandro had made a decision in the darkness of his study at 3 a.m. He would watch her. Not as a predator watches prey. As protection. As something else entirely. The next 3 weeks unfolded in a rhythm Sofia had not experienced since childhood. She arrived at Alejandro's estate at 10 p.m., moving through marble hallways and rooms larger than any apartment she had ever lived in, cleaning in silence while he worked behind closed doors. She left at 6 a.m. and drove her repaired Honda to the industrial district parking lot where she slept until noon, then showered at the 24-hour gym on 5th Avenue for $12 a month. She ate one meal a day at the diner on Pike Street. The checkered floor was cracked. The neon sign buzzed like an injured animal. The smell of stale coffee and bacon grease hung heavy in the air. At 3 in the morning, the booths were empty. The waitress knew not to ask questions. Alejandro watched from the shadows. Not through his men. Himself. He sat in his black sedan across the street, watching her through the window as she sat alone in a corner booth with her grandmother's recipe book open, writing notes in the margins in handwriting so small it looked like prayer. He followed her after she left, watched her drive to the parking lot and recline the driver's seat, watched her pull a blanket over herself that barely reached her chin. It was the 6th night of this when everything changed. Emma collapsed at 7 p.m., her small body burning with fever so high the thermometer stopped at 105.7 degrees. 3 doctors came. They examined her. They stood in the hallway speaking in quiet voices about viral infections and waiting, about letting her body fight, about monitoring closely. None of them moved toward a cure. At 11 p.m., Sofia arrived for her shift. She was walking past Emma's room when she heard the child's breathing, not normal. Not shallow. Something deeper, something wrong. A sound like wind through a broken window. She pushed the door open. Emma lay in a 4-poster bed surrounded by cooling compresses, her small frame rigid with fever, her lips pale. Sofia's years of nursing training, the education she had abandoned when Douglas Hale found her, rose up through her body like muscle memory. She moved to the bed, lifted the child's arm, checked the skin. She listened to the breathing. She looked at the eyes. Call the hospital, Sofia said to the nurse standing in the corner. Tell them it's acute epiglottitis. Get a pediatric intubation team. Now. Who are you two? Now. Sofia's voice was a blade. The nurse moved. Within minutes, an ambulance was outside. Within the hour, Emma was intubated, stable, a team of specialists checking vitals with stunned expressions because this girl had seen what 3 doctors had missed. At 4 in the morning, Alejandro sat across from Sofia in his study while Emma slept upstairs, finally stable, finally breathing normally. The fireplace was dark. The city outside was silent except for the sound of rain beginning to fall, washing the last of the snow away. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, slid one to her. You knew what to do when 3 doctors didn't, he said. Why? Sofia wrapped her hands around the glass but did not drink. I was a nursing student. Before I had to leave. Leave what? Her jaw tightened. My life. Alejandro leaned forward, elbows on the desk. I know you sleep in your car. I know you've been homeless for 2 years. I know you run from something. I'm asking now. Sofia stood, her chair scraping against the floor. You don't get to ask me that. I work for you. That's all. Sit down. His voice was firm but not cruel. Saturday. He pulled an envelope from his desk drawer, slid it across the mahogany surface. Inside, $5,000 in cash. Crisp bills. Real. Impossible. For saving my daughter's life, Alejandro said. Take it. Get an apartment. Get off the street. Sofia's hands trembled as she stared at the money. More than she had seen in 2 years. More than she had dreamed possible. Why would you help me? She whispered. I am nobody. Alejandro's expression softened in a way that made his face younger, more human, more dangerous because his vulnerability was so unexpected. Because I was you once. 12 years old, sleeping in alleys, stealing food, running from a man who swore I'd never escape. I know what survival looks like. And I know you're running from someone who wants you dead. Sofia's face went white. How do you? Douglas Hale, Alejandro said. The name landed like a gunshot in the quiet room. Sofia stood so fast the chair toppled backward, crashing against the floor with a sound that echoed through the empty house. Don't say that name in front of me. He's looking for you, Alejandro continued, his voice steady. Him and Rachel Dawson. They've been hunting you for 6 months. Hale is a human trafficker. The darkest kind. He preys on desperate women, builds networks, treats them like inventory. You testified against him 3 years ago. The case collapsed. Now he wants you gone before you talk again. Sofia's breathing accelerated. She backed toward the door, each step sharp and terrified. I need to leave. Tonight. He'll find me here. He won't. Alejandro stood, his voice firm as iron. You're under my protection now. Whether you accept that or not. I didn't ask for your protection. You didn't have to. The room fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows, harder now, heavier, like the sky itself was trying to wash something away. Sofia lifted her shirt just enough to reveal the edge of a scar on her lower back, thick, jagged, the kind that comes from something sharp and intentional. One scar among many. A map of 8 years. 8 years, she whispered. 8 years of this. Scars running in every direction like a map of hell. He did this. He swore I'd never escape him. And every time I think I'm safe, he finds me again. She dropped her shirt. Grabbed the envelope. Walked out, closing the door quietly behind her. Alejandro did not stop her. But he picked up his phone. Marco. I want full surveillance on Douglas Hale and Rachel Dawson. 24 hours. Every movement. Every meeting. I want to know what they're planning. The next week, Sofia used the $5,000 to rent a studio apartment in a building on Capitol Hill. She didn't know that Alejandro quietly owned it. She bought a bed. A lamp. Real food. She kept working the overnight shift at the diner, kept her head down, kept her distance. But Douglas Hale was closing in. He showed up at the diner at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, sliding into the booth across from her like he had never left, like 8 years of her running meant nothing. He was tall, gaunt, with cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach them, a smile like a knife wrapped in ice. Hello, Sofia, he said. Been a long time. Sofia's hand moved to the knife in her apron pocket. Get out. Or what? You'll scream? Call the cops? We both know that didn't work last time. He leaned forward. You owe me $85,000. That's what it cost me when you ran. You have 3 days to pay it, or I take it out of you another way. He stood, dropped a business card on the table, and walked toward the door. The card was black. His name was embossed in silver. 3 days, Sofia. Don't make me come find you. He left. Sofia's hand shook so hard she dropped the coffee pot. Glass shattered across the checkered floor, spreading like a dark mirror reflecting everything she had lost. That same night, Rachel Dawson approached her outside the diner. The woman was in her 40s, platinum blonde hair styled like a weapon, designer clothes that cost more than Sofia's monthly salary, a portfolio built on human suffering and money. "You're the girl Douglas is so obsessed with," Rachel said, her voice dripping with false sweetness like poison in honey. "I don't see what's so special. You're nobody. A homeless girl playing dress-up. If you were smart, you'd disappear before he gets bored of hunting you and just kills you outright." Sofia said nothing. Rachel smiled. 3 days, sweetheart. Tick-tock. She walked away, heels clicking against the concrete like a countdown. But what Sofia did not know was that Alindro's men had recorded every word. They had video. They had audio. They had evidence of a threat that was now documented, dated, time-stamped. And Alindro Caruso, the most dangerous man in the Pacific Northwest, now had everything he needed. The Aurora Bridge stretched across the night like a blade waiting to cut. Sofia Reynolds stood at the railing, her hands gripping wet metal, her body shaking so hard her teeth chattered against the freezing rain. 3:47 in the morning. The water below was black and endless, and she had been standing here for 20 minutes, counting reasons to stay and finding none. $78 in her pocket. That was everything. 2 weeks of rent paid, which meant she had nothing left for food, for gas, for the miracle she needed in the next 72 hours. Douglas Hale's words echoed through her skull like a curse that could not be erased. 3 days, Sofia. I take it out of you another way. She understood what that meant. She had learned what that meant 8 years ago when he first found her in that basement, when he taught her that her body was something he owned, something he could collect payment from whenever the mood struck him. The scars on her back throbbed with the cold, a map of all the ways she had tried to escape him before. Her hands loosened on the railing. Just let go. It would be so easy. The water would be cold, but only for a moment. Then nothing. No more running. No more fear. No more nights sleeping in her car, no more customers grabbing at her when she refilled their coffee, no more looking over her shoulder expecting him to appear in the darkness. Rain pounded her face like accusations. She thought about Emma. That 7-year-old girl with dark curls and serious eyes, the one who had collapsed with a fever that made the doctors whisper words like sepsis and critical in the hallway. Sofia had been in the waiting room of Harborview Medical Center, sitting with Alindro because he had not let her leave his side, and she saw something in that moment that the doctors had missed. The fever was too high, too fast. The girl's breathing had that particular rasp that meant infection in the lungs, not just the bloodstream. Sofia had run to the pediatric Ian. It's the meningitis, not just the fever. You need to, the doctor had called the ICU. They had started antibiotics immediately. By morning, Emma was stabilizing. By afternoon, the fever had broken. Emma had hugged her that next morning, her small arms around Sofia's neck, whispering words that tore Sofia apart. "Thank you for not letting me die." That little girl was still alive because Sofia had chosen to stay. Sofia had chosen to be useful. Sofia had chosen, for once in her broken life, to be the person who saved someone instead of the person being destroyed. She stepped back from the railing. Her legs gave out. She collapsed against the wet concrete, her body folding like a broken puppet, and sobs tore through her chest with a violence that scared her. She had not cried like this in years. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus when she was 22 years old and running for the first time. But now they came in waves, gasping, choking, her whole body racked with the kind of weeping that comes from somewhere beyond reason. She did not see the car parked 50 feet away. She did not see Alindro Caruso sitting in the back seat of his black Mercedes, watching her with his knuckles white on his thighs, his jaw locked so tight a vein pulsed in his temple. He had followed her that night from the diner, unable to let her go home alone, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. His instincts were never wrong. Those instincts had kept him alive through 15 years of running a criminal empire. Those instincts had told him that Sofia Reynolds was someone worth protecting, even if it meant going against every rule he had made for himself. Seeing her at the edge of that bridge broke something inside him. He did not get out of the car. He simply watched until her sobs quieted, until she pulled herself up and walked away from the railing, until he was certain she would make it back to the diner. Only then did he lean forward and tell his driver to follow her at a distance, keeping her safe without her knowing. The next morning arrived grey and cold. Sofia was leaving her shift at the diner, her apron bundled in her arms, her feet aching from 14 hours on concrete, when she heard the footsteps behind her. Not one set. Multiple. Heavy. Fast. She had half a second to understand what was happening before rough hands grabbed her, spun her around, slammed her against the brick wall of the alley behind Pike Street Diner. Douglas Hale's face filled her vision. 49 years old but looking like something carved from stone and cruelty, his breath reeking of whiskey and cigarettes, his eyes the color of wet concrete. Behind him stood 4 men in dark jackets, and behind them, the mouth of the alley was sealed by Hale's black SUV. No one could see in. No one could help. "Time's up, Sofia," he hissed, his hand around her throat, his fingers digging into her windpipe. "Where's my money?" She could not breathe. She could not scream. The world narrowed to the pressure of his hand and the taste of blood in her mouth. Sofia spat in his face. His fist came up. And then the world exploded into movement. 12 men in black materialized from the shadows of the alley like they had been waiting in the concrete itself. Guns drawn. Laser sights cutting through the dim morning light. Marco moved with the speed of a predator, his weapon trained on Hale's chest. Luca and 4 others surrounded the 4 men, and Hale's men immediately dropped their guns, raised their hands, understood in an instant that they had walked into a slaughter. Hale released Sofia and stumbled backward. Alejandro Caruso stepped into the alley. His black cashmere coat cost more than Sofia's entire year of rent. His hands were in his pockets, relaxed, casual, which somehow made him more terrifying than any gun could have been. His eyes were the color of a winter storm, and when he looked at Douglas Hale, everything in the universe seemed to pause. "You're in my city," Alejandro said, his voice deep and solid like an oath carved into stone. "Touching what's mine. That was your mistake." Hale's face went the color of old bone. "Caruso. This doesn't concern you. This is between me and—" "It concerns me now," Alejandro said quietly. Sofia did not need to know the details. She only needed to know that he would never find her again. Rachel Dawson's fall came at dawn on a Tuesday, and it came publicly. Alejandro leaked every file, every transaction, every photograph of Rachel with Douglas Hale, every email discussing payment for human inventory. The FBI received an anonymous tip with complete documentation of her involvement in the trafficking network. Agents arrived at her penthouse in the Columbia Center with cameras rolling, with news helicopters circling overhead, with enough evidence to bury her beneath decades of federal charges. Rachel was arrested in her silk robe, her platinum blonde hair undone, her perfectly manicured hands shaking as they were cuffed behind her back. She screamed about her lawyers, her connections, her innocence. She screamed that this was impossible, that people like her did not go to prison, that someone would fix this. No one fixed anything. She received 40 years in federal prison. Her assets were seized. Every penny was traced and frozen. Her penthouse was auctioned. Her reputation became synonymous with evil, and by the end of the week, every news outlet in the country had run her mugshot, her name forever associated with human trafficking, exploitation, the destruction of vulnerable women. Sofia watched the news coverage from Alejandro's study. The room was all dark wood and leather, with windows overlooking Seattle's skyline stretching out beneath the clouds. She held a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago, watching Rachel Dawson being led into court in an orange jumpsuit, watching the woman's face crumble as the judge read her sentence. 40 years. Rachel Dawson would be 87 years old when she was released, if she lived that long. "You did this," Sofia whispered. "For me." Alejandro stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the gray Seattle morning. When he turned, His expression was unreadable. "No," he said quietly. "I did this because men like Hale don't get to hunt women in my city. I did this because you deserve justice. And I did this because—" He stopped. His jaw clenched. He did not finish the sentence, not yet. Sofia waited. The silence stretched between them like a held breath, like something balanced on the edge of becoming real. Outside, the rain began again. Soft at first, then harder, drumming against the windows like a rhythm counting down to something neither of them could name. The rain drummed against the balcony doors like a clock counting down to something neither of them could name. Sofia stood in the study of Alejandro's estate, the city lights of Seattle spread below them like scattered diamonds on black velvet, and she turned to face the man who had dismantled an empire to protect her. "Why did you follow me?" she asked, her voice steady for the first time in 8 years. "Those 6 nights. After I left the diner." "Why?" Alejandro set down his whiskey glass on the mahogany desk. The ice clinked once, sharp and clear in the silence. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his tailored black shirt open at the collar revealing the edge of a scar that ran from his jaw to his collarbone, a map of a violence he had survived and transformed into power. His eyes were dark storm gray, penetrating, the kind of eyes that had ordered men into darkness and pulled women back into light. "Because I needed to know who you were," he said quietly. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, each word measured. "I needed to see if you were like everyone else. If you would take what I offered and disappear into gratitude. Or if you were different." Sofia moved closer. She had spent 8 years running from a man who believed he owned her body, her choices, her future. She had spent 2 years homeless, sleeping in a Honda Civic with $78 folded in her pocket and her grandmother's recipe book clutched against her chest like a prayer. She had worked double shifts at the diner on Pike Street, her feet aching, her hands raw from scalding dishwater, her tips stolen by managers who looked at her the way Douglas Hale had looked at her, like she was less than human. But in the 3 months since Rachel Dawson and Douglas Hale had been sentenced, something had shifted inside her. She had not run. She had stayed. She had rented a studio apartment on Capitol Hill for $680 a month, money she earned herself, not money given to her, not money that came with invisible chains. She had bought herself a blue dress for Emma's 8th birthday party, walking into that mansion as a guest, not as staff, and when Alejandro saw her in that doorway, he had forgotten how to breathe. "Different how?" Sofia asked, her palm rising to touch the scar on his face. His skin was warm, alive, real. "You didn't want saving," Alejandro said, his eyes closing beneath her touch. "You wanted a chance to save yourself. And I've spent my entire life waiting for someone who understood that." His father had beaten him until he was 17 years old. Alejandro remembered the exact moment he had stopped flinching, the moment his fear had crystallized into something harder, colder, more dangerous. He had built an empire not to escape his father, but to ensure that no child, no woman, no vulnerable person would ever be hunted the way he had been hunted. And then she had collapsed against his SUV on a frozen highway, and something he had sealed away for 42 years had cracked open. "My name is Sofia," she whispered, and it was the first time she had said her own name like it belonged to her, like it was not a label Douglas Hale had given her, like it was not a sound spoken in violence. Alejandro opened his eyes. "I know." "Say it," she demanded. "Sofia." The word fell from his lips like a confession, like a man finally speaking a prayer he had written in blood. She kissed him. Not desperate, not seeking rescue, but as an equal, a woman who had rebuilt herself from ash standing across from a man who had torn himself apart and reassembled himself into something whole. When she pulled back, she whispered, "I'm not your maid anymore." "No," Alejandro said, his voice rough like gravel, like a man who had forgotten how to speak gently and was learning again. "You're not." 6 months later, the kitchen of his estate was filled with flour and laughter. Sofia stood at the counter teaching Emma how to make her grandmother's pasta, the recipe book open to the page where her grandmother had written, in fading pencil, "Make this when you are afraid. Make this when you are alone. Make this when you need to remember where you come from." Emma was 8 years old, small-boned and bright-eyed, her hair the same dark shade as her father's. She had been the first person to see past the trauma in Sofia's eyes to the strength underneath. She had sat beside her at the dinner table 2 months ago and asked, "Are you scared all the time?" Sofia had said yes. Emma had reached across and held her hand and said, "Me too. But Daddy says scary things can't hurt you if you're not alone." Sofia had wept then, the first real tears she had shed since the night the blizzard had changed everything. "Nonna says the pasta should be soft," Emma said, her small fingers working the dough. "Like clouds." "Like clouds," Sofia repeated, and showed her how to fold the edges with patience, the way her grandmother had shown her 40 years ago in a kitchen in Naples, before her life had fallen apart, before she had run to America, before she had given birth to Sofia's mother and then watched her daughter run away from a man who would have killed her. Alejandro stood in the doorway watching them, Marco and Luca positioned discreetly near the kitchen entrance, still guarding, always guarding, because that was the code. But what had changed was why they guarded. In 15 years of working for Alejandro Caruso, Marco had never seen his boss smile the way he smiled now. He had never seen the most powerful man in the Pacific Northwest rendered helpless by the sight of a woman teaching his daughter how to make pasta. "She changed him," Marco muttered to Luca. "No," Luca said, shaking his head slowly. "She reminded him what he fought for. All those years building the empire, all those nights we thought we were fighting for power. We were actually fighting for this. For him to have this." That night, Sofia and Alejandro stood on the balcony overlooking Seattle. The rain had stopped. The sky had cleared. Clouds broke apart to reveal stars, and the city below them glittered with possibility. "Do you ever think about that night?" Sofia asked. "The blizzard? The highway?" "Every day," Alejandro said. His arm was around her waist, his hand splayed against her ribs as if to confirm that her heart was still beating, that this was real, that she was still here. "You were dying in that car. If we had been 5 minutes later." "But you weren't," she said, turning to face him. "And I'm not running anymore. I'm not afraid anymore. Because the most powerful man in the city was willing to wait for a nobody woman to decide she was worth saving too." Alejandro's hands rose to her shoulders. In the 6 months since the sentencing, she had gained weight. Her eyes had lost that hollow look. Her hair was glossy, her skin clear, her hands no longer trembling. But more than that, she had gained herself. She had stopped apologizing for existing. "You were never nobody, Sofia," he said. "Not to me. Not from the moment I saw you clutching that recipe book like it was the only thing left in the world worth holding on to." "It was," she said. "And now? Now I have more." She smiled, and it reached her eyes. "Now I have Emma. I have a job I choose. I have you, if you want me." Alejandro kissed her forehead, her temple, her cheek, and finally her lips. When he pulled back, he dropped to one knee, and behind them, Marco's sharp intake of breath echoed through the balcony doors. "I want you for the rest of my life," Alejandro said, and from his pocket he withdrew a ring, not gaudy, not ostentatious, but simple and perfect, a diamond that caught the city lights and threw them back into her eyes. "Sofia Reynolds, will you stay? Will you marry me? Will you rebuild this life with me, knowing that every day will be a choice, not a sentence?" Sofia said yes before he could finish speaking. She pulled him up and kissed him, and below them Seattle glittered and sang, and for the first time in 8 years, Sofia Reynolds was not running. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.